Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Wherever you are, I do hope you're doing well. Well, this week we're going to take a look at the soaring housing market here in Western Massachusetts. The Realtor Association of Pioneer Valley numbers from the spring found the median sale price of single-family homes across Hampden, Hampshire, and Franklin counties was up nearly 17% from $224,700 in March of 2020 to $262,250 in March of 2021. Sales volume rising 3.5% from year to year, and it's showing no signs of letting up. My guest this week is Bob Canon, the president of Canon Real Estate in Easthampton. Bob has been a realtor for more than 40 years, opening his own agency in 1983. Daily Hampshire Gazette and Valley Advocate readers have voted Canon Real Estate the best real estate agency in a number of polls. No one knows the local market better than Bob, and in this week's Even Better Western Mass podcast, Bob offers some advice for those of you who are in the market to buy and those of you who are looking to sell. Here's my conversation with Bob Canon. Hey, Bob, good to see you.
Well, good to see you, Dave.
I'm going to get you in off the street and from the sales things, although the way things are going here in Hampshire County, is there much for sale right now?
Not really that kind of equals the demand. The demand and the supply are out of balance. So there's a limited supply and lots of demand. So we usually get multiple showings on properties, and in the first few days of showing, you might show it 20, 30 times.
Why is the demand so high?
Well, got low interest rates. And we've had a short supply coming out of the pandemic. Many people were cautious about doing anything. Many sellers who would sell and try to upgrade are not doing it because they're afraid they won't find anything. So therefore, they're hesitant about putting their house on the market. And new construction is way down. Not much available in terms of new construction, and new construction, on the other hand, is very expensive. Hard to build, much less than 600 now, which kind of, puts it out of the price range of a lot of people.
Yeah, part of that, but price of lumber right now.
Yep, price of all things, including kitchen cabinets. You have to order your kitchen cabinets when you start your house because you may not get them for 6 months. And many of the contractors are afraid to build because the price has moved on them 20, 30%. And the customer really can't take that type of change in the price if they have a inflation adjustment of materials. So the buyers are hesitant about getting involved in a new house without knowing the actual price of the house. So that's another reason.
It's insane. You look at it and go, yeah, absolutely. It's a seller's market, but you talk to people, say, okay, if I sell my house, I got to find something to buy. That's easier said than done.
That is a major issue because it depends on where you are in the price range, but many times you're in competition and you have no guarantee that you're going to be able to secure the house that you're trying to buy because you can get beat out. There's a lot of strong buyers out there. I would say that I've never seen as many cash buyers as there are out there. I've just listed one yesterday. I've got 6 showings in one day, and I bet you half of those 6 are cash buyers.
Have you ever seen anything like this where, the prices are just in many ways off the charts, but there's just this demand and so many people, when you put a house on the market, the number of people who are interested in it and who bid on them?
Surely this is a unique market to any I've been in. And as you know, I've been doing this for 42 years. And this market is unlike any others. And mostly it is a supply and demand imbalance, and not ever seen it like this. Even in the 83 to 88, after the 18% interest rates, that was a booming market as well. But this far exceeds that one in terms of the supply being so low and demand being so high.
Yeah, I don't ever remember anything like it. But as you look at the prices of the houses now, is it realistic? I mean, are people 5 years down the road, are we going to find out that people paid too much for their houses and they're going to be worth less than what they paid for?
Uh, that's a good question. I don't know. It's beyond me to see the future. I have my doubts that they'll be too high because new construction is the price setter. And when new construction is so expensive and demand is always seems higher than supply, then it's really hard to exceed what the new cost of a house is. So bottom line is that I have my doubts. Many areas, my son bought in California, and that gave me an insight to say, oh my God, for him, an average house is $2 to $3 million in many parts of California. And so I think for us, it's sticker shock, but with the low interest rates and a house that you would buy at $400,000, the payments are reasonable based upon other options, including rent. So right now, it's still not way out of balance in terms of prices being excessive, but I have no idea where we're going. We do see an increase in inventory. So people are now, with the pandemic being over, I was surprised at the number of people who were afraid to put their house on the market and nervous about having people come in. So there is some changing of it. Supply is getting better. Demand is still high because there's many people that were unsuccessful in getting a house so far. So that's kind of where the market is right now, and I'm not sure that we're too high. I think that generally the cost of new construction, the cost of land development is very high, and there's not much on the planning board's books about adding to the supply, which really is one of the real problems of the low supply. The number of new houses is way down.
Well, I think one of the things that we haven't seen, I know where we live, and back in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, there were developers in this area. People who would develop, build developments where 7 or 8 houses or even bigger than that. You don't seem to see as much of that anymore, do you?
No, there are some regulatory issues that are preventing housing from being started, including thousands of acres in the state of Massachusetts disappearing every year with the CPA money. And the towns have a revenue source, been encouraged to create open space, which most people in towns like. They like the town the way it is, but it creates a problem about whether there's enough housing to meet the demands of the citizenry. So
Yeah, we see that in town where I'm in, Southampton, that the tax base is driven by housing because there's very little or no industry here.
yeah, and I mean, I've experienced in my market, which is mostly the Hamptons, hundreds of acres in the last couple of years gone from development forever. And now there's starting to recognize that there's a shortage of housing. And in the budget, I noticed that they proposed, I want to say, and I'm not really positive, but I want to say it was close to 100 million for affordable housing, so you're paying to take it off the market, and now you're going to pay to supply it. So it's a very expensive way to go about trying to, supply enough housing to meet the demands of the market.
Now, how much of this do you think we would have seen anything like this were it not for COVID?
No, we would not have seen it. I think that people would have, so all things stopped, including developers looking for land and people buying houses. And so the supply has been restricted by COVID and COVID related issues. And it goes right down to when a builder builds a house, you got to order your kitchen cabinets the day you start the house, which is very hard to do. So normally you would measure after it gets sheetrocked, and it would fit right into the exact measurements that you're doing, and you could get your cabinets in 4 to 6 weeks. And now you're getting in 6 months, but that's only one of the items that go into a house. There's a lot of other items, and the supply chain is kind of broken in a lot more ways than one.
When you talk to the builders, do they see this easing? Is it going to get any better, say, over the next 6 months as far as the supply?
I don't think they're really sure. They've seen some easing recently on the prices and the supplies, but there still is the issue of getting specific things in the house on a timely basis, and everything depends on each other. So if you can't get the electrician to wire your house, you can't move forward to sheetrock it and get to the next stages. So it's just taken a lot more time to overcome those, and also trying to guess where prices are going to be.
You know, owning your own home is always the American dream. But it seems this day and age, at least in certain locations, that owning a home for many people is just completely out of reach. They just can't afford it.
Yeah, I worry about that. You know, I think that it's an obligation for us as the existing people in the community to try to make sure that housing is within the reach of most people. And it's a funny thing, as I kind of go back to my visit to California, seeing all of the people who are homeless in the downtown areas with a tent, and now it's gotten extreme issues. So now they're forced to find a way to resolve the fact that people don't have housing. And if we continue to ignore the fact that people have to have a place to live, they need food, they need water, and they need a place to live over their head. And so we'd be wise to try to do our best to encourage housing. And I think it has to be done from a general statewide level to encourage housing. And that can be done in a number of ways. They can do it, but I don't know if the urgency, I think they're aware of it now, but I don't think the urgency is there where it needs to be. And I also think local communities are the ones that drive it. And if you encourage them to do their fair share of the amount of housing that's needed in the state through your current population, I bet you'll find that they'll find a way to ease zoning restrictions and stuff like that. I mean, I look at my own town that I work out of, and 75% of the homes that are existing are non-conforming, grandfathered use. 75% of the houses do not meet current zoning because they've got zoned out. Like the Plains area, they're all 12,000 square feet, but if you build one today, you need 40,000 square feet. So kind of.
It's just crazy. And the fact is, you mentioned California. I mean, it's certainly not unique to this area. This is all across the country.
It is. There is a housing shortage everywhere. People that are going into Florida experience that a little bit, where there's people overpaying the asking price because the demand is, again, even in Florida, because there's a lot of houses for sale there. There's a bigger turnover that they're having to go over the asking price in order to obtain a house. So you really have a supply-demand issues in almost everywhere. I really haven't found anybody that's not experiencing this.
I mean, when you look at, say somebody's looking to buy a house, what advice do you give them as far as, yes, this is how much money you can get from the bank, but when you go in and bid for a house, there's a good chance you're going to have 4 or 5, maybe 10 people who are going to be bidding above you. So what do you do?
Well, you think like a seller, which is really hard to do. So you get them, typically a buyer thinks like a buyer, which they're naturally inclined to do, as they should. But when I have customers that want a house and want to buy a house, I said, listen, put your hat on. I want you to start to think like the seller, what's important to sellers. And we've been able to get more than our share of houses that are on the market by having the right thinking when you move into making an offer. And it goes down to waiving a home inspection. We did a home inspection with some friends of ours who waived a home inspection because they did our inspection when they walked through. And many buyers have tapped family for short-term loans. So that says that they're not financing the house. It's a cash buyer. So and then flexible on closing dates. But again, it's important to take a look at the seller. What's the seller trying to accomplish? How can you meet those expectations so that you're going to be the winner in the sweepstakes for a house, so to speak? And that's, if you think like that, you're able to do it. Flexibility in closing, the seller's looking for something, say, oh, well, I got a house, I don't need to close right away. Whenever you find a house, within a certain reasonable period of time is fine with me. So all of those things go into play about creating an offer that is attractive, because it's not always the highest price.
No,
because it could be a high price and you've got to get by the bank if the bank's involved. And if it doesn't appraise out, you can have issues. So many people are waiving home inspections or are willing to pay over the appraised value so that you can beat the appraisal that if a bank comes in lower than the agreed upon sales price. So there's a number of different ways that you can create an offer that's attractive to a seller, but you need to do your homework and find out, okay, why are you selling? What's important to you? And then create that offer that meets those expectations or their hopes.
I mean, do you think it wasn't all that long ago that if you met a buyer's price, that more than likely you were going to get the place, or even if you came in a little bit below. But you say that does happen in some instances, but it just seems in more and more instances it's going quite a bit above what they were asking.
Yeah, I mean, it does. The key is that if the seller has a intelligent asking price, then he's likely going to do better than what he's asking. And so therefore, when you've got 20 people looking at a house and the house meets the expectations or needs of the buyer, then the buyers have been looking, many of the buyers have been looking for 2-3 months. And some of them make 5 to 10 offers on houses and not gotten one. So they get a little anxious and they do what they got to do to be able to obtain a house, because the alternative is that they can't move or they're stuck where they are. So there's a lot of that. But if, it is a little frosty in some cases where your seller will say, I don't care. I heard that the market's crazy, and they make up a number and they overshoot the market, and then the buyers. So here's the thing about the market is the buyers know what things are worth. They're already gone in all these houses and they may have made offers on a bunch of them and not got them. They know what things are going for. And if you're over the market, they'll just walk through it and say, well, this guy's way off. This is not within reason. So that's where having an intelligent asking price is helpful in making sure that the buyers recognize the fact that the value is there.
Sure. What would you offer for advice for first-time home buyers? They're starting the process. Is the process begin with going to a bank and finding out how much money you can borrow and going from there, or finding a real estate agent you can trust?
Oh, you hit the right one, Dave. A real estate, to me, they're better off talking to a real estate agent that you can trust first, because many times a buyer will come in here and based upon their particular situation, it may not be an answer of a local bank. It may be an answer of a mortgage company. And it may be a 100% financing rural housing loan or a VA loan or an FHA loan. So not all lending institutions have all answers for all people. So when we meet with people, we talk about you must have a pre-approval in order to make an offer. If you go in and make an offer without a pre-approval, they're not even going to look at you, even if you have the highest number on the offer, because the seller is going to say, is he qualified? We have no idea. So after you've met with a realtor, if the realtor's smart, he'll send you to a lending institution that has the type of mortgage financing that suits you, and you'll get a pre-approval, which you must have in order to make an offer, that allows you to take some of the angst out of the seller's mind. And again, you think about the seller. Okay, how am I going to impress the seller? What am I going to do? And then at the end of the day, sometimes there's sellers that want to sell to somebody that's going to appreciate their house. There's a lot of emotion in it. And the seller says, hey, I'd love a family, that would appreciate my house and have all of the wonderful memories that I had in my house. And so many times they'll write a love letter, is what we call it. And then, of course, there's many sellers that say, don't send me a love letter. I don't want one, but not always. You really kind of, again, knowing the seller, knowing about the seller, and knowing what's important to the seller are all key issues. But when you meet with a realtor, you'll be prepared for the market and what's going on in the market and what you need to do to be successful. And generally, because we're in the market every day, we have an idea of what things are going for. We have an idea of how to overcome things, whether it be to have a contractor go through the house when you look at it so you can waive the home inspection. I don't recommend waiving home inspections generally, but if you have a contractor who's experienced, contractors typically are better than home inspectors many times, because they will not nitpick on little issues, which you don't want to nitpick a seller in this market. You're going to have to expect that there's no perfect houses. I don't care if they built it yesterday. And a contractor can look at it and say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this house. And many times, in Easthampton, I've been here so long that I can tell the difference between a Bernie Gall and an Eddie Gall house and a Jim Boyle and a Dick Boyle house. And, so you have all of these different contractors, and generally that they do a pretty good job. Today's housing, the codes, the building codes are very strict. So generally they've been inspected every inch of the way, and they're pretty good.
Well, obviously, and I would say that you would love to have folks go through Canon Real Estate, but when you look as an overall picture, when you look for a real estate agent, obviously the first thing you need someone who really, really knows the market and the ins and outs, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, you want to do business with somebody that's been around, that's been through different marketplaces, and that is active in the current market that you're in, because this market is like no other market. So you might have experience, but you don't have any experience in the current market. So, and then also, like we have, I don't know, I have 15 people that work for me. I bet you we have well over 300 years of experience. So even the newer people can check in with an experienced agent about how to overcome or how to approach buying a house. And so we share information with each other so that we all can be successful at it, and we can deliver superior service to home buyers and home sellers. Sure. And in addition to that, we likely know a lot of history about the houses that we're selling, and we probably know who built it, and we probably know who did the addition. And when you go through it and you run into an issue, you want to make sure that they have access to people that are associated with the home building and the home repair services that affect your house. So those are all key issues, and we stand behind what we do in this in our company.
Well, you talk about issues that, let's face it, no matter what you do, it's a complicated process buying a home that if you're buying, you're looking to buy, there's always going to be some kind of an issue, right? Big or little.
I have not seen the perfect house yet. And that's I bet you I've been involved as my company and myself over 10,000 in the 40 years that I've been here. So seen a lot. Every time I think I've seen everything, though, I do get a surprise every now and then. But it's always a learning experience, and generally can go through a house and kind of view what might potentially be areas of issue. And one of the big things, of course, is if you're in a hill town and have a septic system, that's always a challenge because the septic system can be quite a hurdle, and it can be anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000. So they can vary quite a bit, but again, looking at a Title V and making sure that it is a good inspection, and the system is built for the number of bedrooms that are in the house, because we've seen it where they said that it's a 4-bedroom house and then the septic system was built for a 3-bedroom house. It's a major issue if you have a intent of having 4 bedrooms in the house, or if the house has 4 bedrooms.
I can imagine too, for folks who are coming here from bigger cities, you see, a lot of people who are moving from those big cities, and they've always dealt with city water and city sewage. So when they get to a town like Easthampton or Southampton, say you need a septic tank, say what?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's a culture shock.
Yeah, it's a culture shock. Yeah, and it's no easy task. There are some areas that drain well and are good for septics, and there are some areas that are involved. But a lot has to do with the Title V, which now educates the buyer that we never had. Title V came in about 10, 15 years ago, and before that, I'd ask sellers where my septic system is and where your septic system is, and they'd look at me and they'd say, "What septic system?" I said, "Well, you got a septic system here." More times than not, I'm there. "Oh no, you got a septic system somewhere." So
Yes.
anyways,
It's all yours, and it has to go someplace.
That's right.
You look at it too when you started out in the late 70s, early 80s, and you look into the mid 80s where interest rates were upwards to what, 15, 16, sometimes 17%. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that interest rates would be as low as they are today in 2021?
No. So I started in 79, and 80 to 82 is when they hit 18%. And I remember the thing that sticks in my mind like yesterday, walking into a local bank, and the president of the bank said to me and my boss, he said, "You guys can turn around." He says, "We're not loaning on houses anymore." And I freaked because I had 3 kids and a non-working wife. And that was quite a shock to me that you actually had that type of reaction. Now, since the early 80s to essentially the current times, the rates have gone down. And that had spurred, as the rates hit these current rates, the cost of home ownership has gotten better and more affordable for people. So generally, the low interest rates do support the marketplace that we have. And a raise in the interest rates don't have to go that far, because the amount of money you're borrowing is not, back when I first started, a house, you could buy a house for 25,000. I know that's hard to believe, but you could buy a house for 25. That same house today is now 250. So, but people made a lot less money back in the 80s as opposed to what they make now. So bottom line is that it hasn't really got more costly. The numbers are higher, but as a percentage of your income, pretty much is the same way. They say 28 to 33% of your income could go to the mortgage, and up to 36 to 38 can go to your mortgage and all your long-term debt. Those numbers have not changed.
They haven't changed now.
No.
Well, you look at it, you think that, I built my house for 25. I built this one for 25,000, but you build a house for 25,000, 35, 40 years ago, it's worth 250,000. Where else can you make that kind of investment too? Which I guess housing is probably the only thing where the value goes up over time.
Well, for the average person, I think it's so. I think the stock market is similar type of thing, but most people don't have that type of expertise, and a home serves multiple purposes in addition to the fact that eventually you'll own it outright. It's and a place to live and a place to raise your family, and those benefits that you get out of home ownership will far outweigh the value that you get out of it. And you know it, and I know it, because we raised our kids in our house, and those memories are precious, and that even though your house is worth a lot more, it's kind of relative to the point with what people earn today.
Do you think there's a chance in many communities? I mean, you see in communities like Southampton, Easthampton, and Northampton, there are folks who've been in their homes for a long, long time. And of course, taxes are going up and everything else. The fear that many people may be taxed out of their houses?
I worry about that. I worry about that as part of the issue that there's needs out there. Communities have needs. They have schools that they have to educate the kids. But at the same time, people need to realize that us who are working currently and earning a salary based upon today's salaries, there are many older people who are on fixed incomes, and you have to respect it, and you have to make sure that people can afford to keep their homes, and that this is an important element of affordable living.
Yeah, absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground in about 35 minutes or so. Anything you want to touch upon that we may have missed, as far as advice to folks who are in the market or who are looking to sell?
Yeah, no, I think you did a good job, Dave. I really think that I like the idea of starting with a realtor, because you could go to a bank, but it may not be the best option because they may not have the tools or the type of mortgages that may fit you best. But when you start with it, and I mean, with all of our buyers, we want to sit down for an hour. We don't want to go run off and show you a house without understanding your situation, where your comfort level is, and where you should be price-wise, and then also explaining the market to you, because today the market's one thing, 6 months it may be something different. So by going to an expert who deals in it every day, you're going to have a good handle on what you can expect and what you need to do to be successful. So that to me is huge, and we'll prep you about what you need to think about and what you need to do to be successful. So I think those are the most important things. And and people in general, I hope people who have a house and like the community the way that it is, that's important. However, they have to think about the next generation, because if you got people living in the streets, you're going to pay for them one way or another. And see it now, because now in California, they're in a really problematic thing, and the state and the local governments are now having to come up with ways to pay for people who don't have housing and feed people and all of that. So it's important that the vast majority of people be able to afford to live in today's world. So
lots of good advice. My thanks to Bob Canon for taking the time to join me for this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Now, to learn more about Canon Real Estate, you can go to their website, canonre.com. Thanks for watching or listening to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Stay safe, stay well, and if you can, join me next week.